video response for Backwoods and Great White Stoke. Backwoods inspired. He was asking the question in his video about, what comes next? What does the future hold? If we could agree that, I know Backwoods, you said, were you saying the throes of the dying of an empire? I bet Stoke would agree with you on that. I think there's a higher than 25% probability that he would agree with you on that, if not 100%. Where I think the three of us in this case, could find a common denominator, common ground, it would be that there will be changes. What I'd like to say about that is how we're going to handle them. And this goes back to Stoke, where he was observing the lifestyle that Shafe, as well as I portray on here. Shafe's showing a swimming pool, showing a very nice interior, clean house. Y'all may not know it, but behind him is probably $5,000 worth of guitars easily in the one picture. He does a job where he had made sufficient income in his household that even when work was slow for about 6 months, he was able to, make it through it. And then times kind of came around again. I'm obviously in a fancy truck, and it'd be a humble brag for me to even talk about that. But, in my lifestyle, a person doesn't need a Toyota Pro, a person doesn't need a Dodge Ram Rebel, a person doesn't need a Ford Raptor. As a matter of fact, they may be some of the less reliable offering of all the product models, but there's just something extra that goes along with status. So at the time, for me, and you're 100% correct, Stoke, for me, the time that I got this, it wasn't that it was a TRD Pro. It was a midnight blue double black. So I like the color, I like the interior, and the position I was at the time, it wasn't a big wiggle for me to go ahead and get it. And I find myself like those people that Don Ramsey criticizes, the economic guru guy that tells people to get debt free. If middle class people have a middle class house and then 2 very nice cars in the driveway with big dollar car payments on both, those people may be content to be in the middle class. He is what he would say. So you're not wrong there. You ask though, and I don't know, I'd like to get personal with it because I think this is important. You had said, what your house is nice, but what are your kids going to do, right? So and you mentioned the word boomer. Now, my parents are elder boomers, so they're somewhat boomers, but they're like, say, the tail end of the greatest generation, not really solid to it, but they're elder to mid boomers, similar to say like Shafe and I are. I think we're solid mid Gen Xers. Okay, what does that have to do with shit, right? Well, I was an only child. I know Shafe had brothers. We have very different family situations, so let's just talk about mine. I see these statistics, and I haven't done my own research on that, but the statistics of what rent, for example, is going for as a percentage of the average. So they take average income and then they take average rent and like say, hey, look at how different it is compared to 1980 versus now, you know, the percentage of your income. When you made $22,000 a year on average and the average house was $47,000 a year. I get that, and I get the difference, and I see the difference. Now, what I'm going to propose is we are facing what I believe is referred to as an economic equilibrium. So let me explain. God, I hate that term in videos. Something, 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 something. Let me explain. I don't mean it like that. Just hear me out. If you're in Manhattan, in New York City, you are going to pay, say, $2,000 a month, maybe plus, to live in a broom closet, okay? Take that as a percentage of what you make, and, you know, who knows what you're doing there. Because there's all different kinds of jobs, and there's all different kinds of apartments. There's a broom closet up to 8,000 square feet brownstones and above, I bet. So down here, you can still get, say, a 2,000 square foot house maybe, and maybe that's still $2,000 a month. However, the amount of money you make in this area isn't the equivalent of what you would potentially be making in Manhattan, depending on what you were doing. So what I'm trying to say is, some of what I see in the news is the blinders are being put on, and you're showing this economic sloshing of funds and income and value and global interests, and are being correct. However, there's more to that story. For the longest time, I noticed this down here, a person could work in New York City for 20 years in a municipal city job and have a pension and only work for 20 years. After 20 years, they could take their retirement and say they'd make $50,000 to $60,000 a year on their pension. They can sell the domicile that they owned up in New York, buy another house in New Jersey, buy a house down here, and you get what we called snowbirds. And they're still out there. I mean, these people are wealthy enough that not only were they able to stop working after 25 years, but stopped working and were wealthy enough to have two houses that were completely paid for, as well as their nest egg that they live off the interest and leave the principal. Like Backwoods is saying, though, that's changing. The economic opportunity of, well, guess what, Mr. New York City municipal worker? $50,000 a year doesn't go as far down here as it used to. You know, and it's part of, I think, the development and the evolution of property. Should it be a different proportion? I don't know. Because looking back, if you take World War I and World War II back to back, this is just how I see this historically, where the infrastructure of Europe was destroyed and the financials of Europe were relocated to the United States of America. There was a time globally where the United States, from what the history books I've seen said, and as evidence of lifestyle can back that up, it was disproportionate value. Now, a thought that just popped into my head, like, well, the US dollar is separate from the British pound, is separate from the Italian lira. I'll give you that to an extent. I'll give you that to an extent, but I think sentiment towards value of money, I think the same sentiment holds whether your money is a dollar, a peso, or a lira, or a British pound. So that global value was really centered on the United States for the longest time. And what we did with it was different for a time compared to, say, modern-wise, where most of that economic value, I would imagine, has shifted over to the Middle East with petroleum sales. The only thing that necessarily hedged that was us for the longest time getting OPEC to agree to only take US dollars, so people actually had to transfer their monetary units or their value to US dollars in order to buy Middle Eastern petroleum. But you know, that ends up coming to an end for a while. But the point I'm trying to make is there's all these puzzle pieces and all these different moves. Absolutely, things change, things equalize, things bubble again. But back to a personal note, what I'm going to do about it is, as opposed to my parents who built the house that they live in, paid it off for themselves, figure they would live it up right until the bitter end. For me, and I believe, watching you, Stoke, that you may see things very similar. You know, your kids and my kids, I'm not paying my house off for myself. I get eminent domain, okay? I do understand that, and I do understand there would be a tax load. So you got to be smart about it, and you got to have understanding about how things can happen and what it takes to secure your domicile that you get at the king's permission, so to speak, you know. So I'm paying off my house for my daughter, and because things have changed, to me, what I do as a parent, not nearly as quick to expect my kids to move out. I want them to have a good head on their shoulders. I want them to be prepared if that's what they want to decide to do. But for me, I'm also deciding that, you know, this is your home, and it's going to stay your home, and taking almost a smaller version of it, but a legacy approach to my household. And that's my solution for this disparity. All right, like the great Stokes said, hugs and kisses. Catch you on the next one.